Hi there folks, it's me Brodie McLeod again for another 15 view pointless and banal internet exercise using the content delivery platform of YouTube to air my controversial, sometimes interesting, intriguing and valuable content. I'm at the lodge, I'm at Nash Ward now, which is a psychiatric intensive care unit. It's quite good standard of care if you disregard. That's a bit like saying that Adolf Hitler was good if you disregard the Holocaust. I mean, if you disregard all the awful shit, it's quite a good hospital. But in context, I've had a quite poor experience here. So have some other people. Anyway, brushing all that under the carpet. I've been thinking a bit about the Anthropocene ability to use symbolism and to recognize symbols, to store information and to ultimately create our entire civilization. Michio Kaku, the famous physicist, has what he calls a definition of type 1 and type 2 civilizations. And he kind of breaks it down, effectively into two things. So humans do, in essence, two different things, right? So let me put this here, it might look a bit better. They move and they do things, right? So how we get from A to B, really important. Public transport, believe it or not, is one of the most fundamentally important things, or like our transport, be it cars, bikes, buses, whatever, trains, very important because we all have to travel around the planet. When we get to where we're going, we do things. Those things are governed by our ability to be able to store information, communicate, collaborate, network, compromise, and act in reciprocal self-interest to make the economy work and also to manage our environment, our communities, our societies, and everything which is important in what we call human civilization. There's a bit of a juxtaposition, right? The thing that started human civilization, believe it or not, was farming. So, like, we used to be nomadic people, we used to be hunter-gatherers, and we used to be people who would exhaust the natural resources from one area, stay there temporarily, and then move on to the next. We don't do that anymore because they put goats and chickens and pigs into closed environments, began breeding them, and built themselves a fairly sturdy building, I presume. I wasn't around, 500,000 years ago. In fact, they probably had a completely advanced antediluvian civilization where they were all telepathic and had anti-gravity and free energy plasma reactors and direct energy weapons and, interstellar travel. But all that stuff aside, in theory, let's say 50,000 years ago, we had no language necessarily that was like writable, and pretty much I guess there would have been a period where people were just sort of what you could only describe as non-verbal, like dogs and cats and birds and whales all communicate making these weird noises. And even AI has made, I've read some like PubMed papers that are fairly, that's bullshit, I haven't read the PubMed, I've seen like verifiable sources that say that they've deciphered animal communication and how it works and what it means, but it's very vague. Most of the time when a cat meows, it just wants to be stroked, or like if it meows at another cat, it's not like a dialect or a syntax or a kind of like a any sort of like semiotic term. It's just meow, like it doesn't really mean anything. Anyway, Yeah, I'll just read you the PDF. Like it's about, we make, you know, Ferraris and spaceships and governments and political parties and graphene and shit like that, and like slugs and toads and fish and horses and you know, every other mammal in the biosphere. Duck-billed platypus especially, because it's got 2 sets of retinal cones and it's a mammal, but it lays eggs, it's got webbed feet, and it's got hair and stingers. So yeah, if you don't believe in intelligent design, I don't know why the fuck we have appendixes or canine teeth. You know, I do, you know, but you get my drift anyway. Let's see what it says. Probably quite interesting. The semiotic threshold, representation, meta-communication, and the anthropological edifice of human civilization. I might just show you, right, before I get into this, the prompt that I put in, because it's kind of relevant. So I said in the Dan Brown publications, the main character is a symbologist. This isn't actually a real job, but it's a nod to the divinity of man and the anthropological edifice of representational symbols used to measure, denote factual information, and manage resources. For early man, the evolution of symbolism, along with primitive farming, was the culmination of humanistic evolution, which undergirds our entire society today. Effectively, being able to distinguish and discern a false representation or concept or quantity, and to apply meaning to an edifice which isn't its physically, a great sentence there, you know, sans boy, which isn't physically what it is. That's what I was going to say. Representing is the most prominent Anthropocene trait, as most animals other than Homo sapiens cannot use allegory, or therefore academia, instead of relying on instinct and predetermined, genetically homogenized behavioral and animalistic drives. So the application of symbolism is widely regarded as the most prominent differential between Homo sapiens, busy building iPhones and satellites, whilst the rest of the sentient life in the biosphere urges to eat, reproduce, and ensure its own safety. So in a nutshell, there are many great references in various theses which ultimately define the divinity of humanity, with its ability to store and communicate information as the main binary differential, as opposed to animals who remain hunter-gatherers without civilization or indeed free will. However, almost every dog owner will be aware there's a contradictorily demonstrable instances whereby animals like lions, for instance, who could easily fatally injure its handler, does contradictorily to various scientific papers and anthropology texts and studies, clearly possess the ability to easily differentiate between play, effectively a falsehood, or a symbolic representation of a struggle or altercation. So, you know, the lion doesn't kill and maul the person playing with it. It could do, and like, if this kind of differential is true, I kind of see, like, yeah, we're definitely not animals. We don't run on our like base carnal urges, instincts and hormones. We have our own intellectual opinions on things and personalities. So I asked it to investigate the juxtaposition between the way we have all that shit and animals aren't supposed to, but they do. Animals do understand play, you know, as opposed to aggression, or even if they're, you know, deadly animals, they still comprehend the concept of, you know, levity and affection and sort of, you know, acting almost. You know, they go through the throngs of, you know, their actions, even though they could be lethal, because they know that there is no harm intended and they're not at risk. They know that they recognise their handler, and, you know. So investigate, I asked Gemini, the juxtaposition and explain how symbolic representation is prevalent in the animal kingdom, however hasn't resulted in any language, should say a bit comma there, storage of information or civilization in the animal kingdom. Right, now let's read the thing. It's just a bit more interesting if you could hear the prompt. There we go. The semiotic threshold, representation, meta-communication, and the anthropological edifice of human civilization. The figure of the symbologist, prominently featured in the publications of Dan Brown, serves as a popular cultural vessel for a profound philosophical and anthropological inquiry, the nature of the divinity of man as expressed through the creation and manipulation of signs. While the fictional portrayal of a symbologist may lack a precise correlate in the professional academic world, the concept itself is a sophisticated nod to the tradition of animal symbolicum, a term coined by Ernest Cassirer to define the human species not merely by its capacity to reason, but by its unique existence with self-created universe of symbolic forms. This symbolic universe, comprising of language, myth, art, religion, and science, functions as an anthropological edifice that transcends the physical environment, allowing humanity to measure, denote factual information, and manage resources through abstraction rather than purely animalistic drive. For early man, the evolution of symbolism, occurring in tandem with the advent of primitive farming, represented the culmination of a humanistic evolution that undergirds modern society. This transition allowed humans to inhabit a world rather than a mere environment, establishing a binary differential between Homo sapiens and the rest of the sentient biosphere. The most prominent trait of the Anthropocene is the ability to distinguish and discern a false representation of a concept or quantity to apply meaning to an edifice that is not physically what it is representing. They didn't get a typo in that bit, like me. The capacity for allegory and academic inquiry distinguishes humans from other animals that rely primarily on instinct and predetermined, genetically homogenized behavioral patterns. However, a significant juxtaposition arises when observing the social behavior of other complex mammals. As noted by many who interact closely with animals, social predators such as lions or domestic canids, I don't even know what canid is. I don't know. Anyway, apparently canids clearly possess the ability to differentiate between play and reality. A lion that play fights with its handler or a fellow pride member is engaging in a falsehood, a symbolic representation of a struggle or altercation that it knows is not a real battle. The phenomenon, characterized by Gregory Bateson as meta-communication, implies that animals are capable of navigating multiple layers of reality and representation. The investigation into this juxtaposition reveals that while symbolic representation is prevalent in the animal kingdom, it has failed to result in the language, storage of information, or the construction of a cumulative civilization, primarily due to the absence of specific cognitive and social ratcheting mechanisms unique to human lineage. The architecture of signs, Peircean semiotics, and the symbolic shift. To analyse why the animal capacity for play is not translated into a civilizational edifice, one must first understand the fundamental categories of signs. Charles Sanders Peirce established a triad of signs: relations, icon, index, and symbol, which denote the logically available ways in which signs refer to their objects. I normally don't read these graphs because they're annoying, but I'm going to. So the first line says, like, you've got sign category, it says icon, relational basis, qualitative resemblance. Primary mechanism for that is topological similarity or sensory likeness, and then you've got domain of prevalence, so that's widespread in animals like mimicry and play. That's qualitative resemblance. The next bit is index, which is existential connection, physical temporal causality, or pointing to foundational animal communications, for example alarm calls. You've got symbols, right? So arbitrary determination, social convention, and sign-sign relationships, so uniquely developed only in human civilization, right? Icons refer to their objects through similarity. For instance, a map of an icon is a territory, and a play bite is an icon of a lethal attack. It indices refer to a correspondence in fact, such as a footprint indicating the presence of an animal or a thermometer indicating heat. Most animal communications are constrained to these two levels. For example, a monkey baring its teeth is using an icon of biting to communicate a threat, while a vervet monkey's alarm call functions as an index that points to a specific predator in the immediate vicinity. So there is like language in animals in some extent. Symbolic shift that defines human cognition involves the transition from sign-object relationships, icons and indices, to sign-sign relationships. So symbols are arbitrary. There's no inherent reason why the word cat should represent a feline, yet through social convention it becomes a stable token that can be manipulated with a larger system of other tokens. This shift allows for displacement, which is the ability to communicate about things that are not present in the immediate time or space. While a lion's play bite communicates a falsehood in the moment, it cannot be used to discuss a play bite that occurred 3 months ago or one that might occur in a different territory. This representation remains interactionally locked, whereas humans' symbolism is informationally stored and cross-contextually mobile. The paradox of play, meta-communication as the as-if frame. So the existence of social play in man and mammals presents a critical evolutionary step towards symbolism. Gregory Bateson's observation of monkeys at the San Francisco Zoo led to the hypothesis that play could only occur if organisms were capable of exchanging signals carrying the message, "This is play." This message establishes a magic circle or a psychological frame that transforms actions from their literal meaning into something more representational. The expanded statement, "This is play," functions as a paradox of the Russellian type. So these actions in which we now engage do not denote what would be denoted by those actions which these actions denote. So for a lion, a play bite stands for the bite, but it also simultaneously negates the bite. So this requires the participant organisms to be aware of the differences between the map and the territory. So a play battle, dogs, wolves are canids, I thought they were canines. Dropping the chest to the ground is the mechanism which punctuates that what follows is fun. So you might notice that your dog sort of goes down on all fours, puts his legs out, he's really sound when you're doing the thing. Then you've got play, pant, great apes and dogs. So rhythmic, audible expiration says I want to play. So when you've got like gorillas, they breathe very heavily, for example. Then you've got play face. So primates and social carnivores will exhibit a relaxed open mouth display, and effective signalling prevents escalation. In this painful exchange, we find evidence of metacognition, the ability to recognize and navigate multiple layers of reality. The dog who mouths another's neck, or the lion who wrestles with its pride mates, knows that in another context this would be lethal, yet within the play context it represents such an attack without being one. So this navigation requires a sophisticated awareness of mental states, both one's own intentions and that of the partner, which ethologists like Mark Beckhoff suggest is a foundation of moral behaviour and world justice. Despite this metacognitive sophistication, the play frame in the animal kingdom is transient. So it's an embodied awareness that exists during the interaction but does not condense into a persistent declarative symbolic unit. Sorry, I'm on this fucking clonazepam shit. I can't really, it makes me like dribble and fumble my words. Animals create a semiotic scaffold for the duration of the play bout, but they do not use that scaffold to build a library of concepts. The falsehood of play remains a procedural tool for social bonding and motor skill development rather than a declarative tool for informational storage. The cumulative ratchet, why animal culture fails to accumulate. So the binary differential between the hunter-gatherer experience of animals and the civilization building Homo sapiens, largely explained by what Michael Tomasello calls the ratchet effect. Human culture exhibits unparalleled complexity because its cumulative beneficial modifications to a technique or idea are preserved and built upon by subsequent generations. This process depends heavily on the reliability of information, high fidelity transmission, rather than just the efficiency of refinement. Can't bother to read this chart. A bit of video is going to be too long. If non-human animals, social learning in non-human animals, social learning is often reliant on low fidelity mechanisms such as stimulus, enhancement or emulation. In emulation, a younger animal observes an adult achieving a goal and tries to achieve the same goal using its own methods, essentially reinventing the wheel. Because the exact process is not copied, innovations made by an Einstein-level individual are often lost. This is why, although different groups of chimpanzees or meerkats may have distinct traditions, wake up times or nut cracking styles, these traditions don't incrementally increase in complexity over centuries. They don't get better at it, basically. Furthermore, the Jourdain hypothesis argues that animals may possess culture in the form of socially transmitted behaviours but lack the meta-representational abilities to understand that they are cultural beings. They lack the design stance, the understanding that a tool or behaviour was intentionally created for a specific function, which is a key component of human cultural transmission. Without the ability to mentally represent a group norm as an abstract entity, animals cannot purposefully modify or defend those norms, so leading to a culture that is a simple collection of traditions rather than an integrated building block system. Recursive thought and the language of thought. A second critical barrier to animal civilization is the absence of recursion. While many animal communications systems possess semantics, I don't know what that says. What it means is signs that have meaning, and some even possess elements of displacement, honeybee dances. None have been shown to use recursion, the ability to embed linguistic units within units of the same type. So recursion allows humans to build arbitrarily complex mental structures from small sets of primitives, a capacity Tecmush Fitch calls dendrophilia, or the proclivity for tree structures. Mathematically, this allows human language to be open-ended, capable of producing an infinite variety of expressions. In contrast, animal systems are limited productivity models, so a lion's roaring can establish territory and intimidate rivals across miles, but the roar's meaning is fixed. It can't be recombined with a purr to describe a friendly territory. The transition from indexical symbolic communication was simulated in robot evolutionary experiments using the evolvable mathematical models EMMS. These models showed that symbolic communication emerged spontaneously when robots needed to exchange information about multiple social dimensions, X and Y, over a limited one-dimensional channel. The agent's genome, represented as 3 graphs, evolved state equations that allowed the output signal to be modified by the input signal received by a neighbour, transforming the interaction into a dialogue in that negotiational meeting. It's a governing equation for such displacement in discrete time simulation that looks like some shit I've never seen before because they've got a D in maths. Tell me if you know what that means, or just pause the video and go and lube up your butt plug. Where A is drawn from a Gaussian distribution, and whatever the fuck that symbol is, I don't know what the fuck that fucking little jabber there is, and look at him, acts as the control variable, right? So this suggests that human symbolic capacity is a computational solution to the problem of high dimensional information management. Solution in the animal kingdom focused on immediate fitness, relevant messages about food, danger and mating has not faced the same selective pressure to adopt. So the lion as a social actor, intelligence versus symbolism. The lion provides a compelling case study because it's a highly intelligent social predator that could potentially massacre undefended groups of hominins, yet it has in a stable ecological niche for about 4 million years without developing civilization. Lions exhibit complex behavioural correlations between sociality and activity with clear hierarchies, as well as age-related activity budgets. There is a pride thing with lions. Lions are capable of social engagement with humans, as seen in whatever the fuck that's pronounced as, Dune culture, where the lions and humans shared water holes without conflict. This suggests a multi-species social intelligence. However, the lion's world is what Gadamer calls an Unwelt, an environment of immediate stimuli and responses. While they can communicate and reach an understanding, they cannot make themselves understood about matters of fact that transcend the immediate social context. So the lion civilization doesn't exist because lions lack the ability to externalize their conceptual storehouse, if that makes sense to you. I hope it does. As noted in studies of animal cognition, a species communication system typically expresses only a small subset of concepts that they can actually remember and manipulate. A lion may form a complex mental representation of a cat behind a tree, but it has no symbolic means to store this concept for a non-present pride member or a future cub. The information is trapped in the here and now. Informational storage, the anthropological edifice of the symbols. The divinity of man referenced in the user setup relates to the human ability to store and communicate information as a binary differential against animals. This storage is the anthropological edifice, the layer of symbolic meaning that we place over the physical world. For early man, this began with symbols used to measure, denote factual information and manage resources. Ernst Cassier's philosophy of symbolic forms argues that understanding is mediated through the various symbolic systems, each structuring reality in a different way. The evolution from mythical thinking, emotive and holistic, to scientific thought, which is objective and abstract, is the hallmark of humanistic evolution. This process allows for the creation of complex heterogeneous texts in art, fashion, technology, which compete with natural codes for influence on human behaviour. In contrast, the semiosphere of nature available to lions and other animals is comprised of natural signals and indices, while humans are animal symbolicum, inhabiting a semiosphere of culture. We're also animals inhabiting a semiosphere of nature. The juxtaposition is not a lack of representation in animals, but a lack of secondary, persistent symbolic world. So the role of free will and this symbolic rewriting of instinct. Got massive cups today, the only one in the whole kitchen. And it's got cold decaf in it, which is rank. Good times, so that down the sink. The role of free will in the symbolic rewriting of instinct. The query suggests that animals remain hunter-gatherers without civilization, or indeed free will. From a semiotic perspective, free will in humans can be interpreted as the ability to use symbolic narratives to override animalistic drives, while a lion's behaviour is flexible and sensitive to temporal changes and status. For instance, nomadic males do not roar to avoid attracting resident rivals. It is still largely driven by fitness-relevant messages. Human symbolism allows for causal opacity, where we perform rituals and build technologies whose immediate purpose is not clear, but which are maintained through that normative conformity and social obligation, steeped in tradition, of course. It creates a world where humans are not just in the world like other creatures, but can develop a stance or relation to that world. This distance is provided by the symbol is the space where free will, as the choice between completing symbolic interpretations, resides. The symbologist so thus represents the guardian of this distance. In Dan Brown's work, the character interprets signs that have been sacralized through interaction rituals, defining the interaction order that makes human society possible. This is a manifestation of the universal mind in the theosophical sense, where the embodied man is but an instrument of the spiritual man who exists within the symbolic history of the universe. Civilization synthesis: why the lion remains at the waterhole. The investigation into the prevalence of symbolism in the animal kingdom contrasted with the absence of animal civilization, asking a specific set of requirements for the anthropological edifice. So arbitrariness and displacement: the sign must be detachable from its referent and immediate moment. Recursive composition: the ability to nest symbols or create complex hierarchical meanings. High fidelity ratcheting mechanisms, in brackets, true imitation or teaching, that provides the loss of information across generations. And then external storage: to use the environment as a persistent symbolic archive, like the Flintstones chiseling on fucking tablets, or Zachariah Sitchin, or whatever fucking shit you want to use for a metaphor, from cave paintings to cloud storage. Lions and dogs have mastered the first order of representation. They can use iconic and indexical signs to navigate social reality and play fight with humans or peers. They can differentiate play, a falsehood, from a reality, struggle. However, because their symbolism is tied to resemblance and interaction, it never undergoes a qualitative jump to a symbolic system that can be stored and ratcheted. The divinity of man is, in this view, the ability to the as-if of play into a permanent world, while a lion addresses with respect its social superiors with a tradition of shared survival. It does not write the life story of its practitioners into a curriculum. Human civilization is the result of the dendrophilic drive to infer free tree structures from strings of experience, creating a symbolic universe that allows us to build satellites while our animal counterparts remain hunter-gatherers in the immediate signals. Here's the conclusion. Means you get to stop watching this soon, which is nice for you. Conclusions, right? Persistence of the symbolic divide. The juxtaposition of the lion who plays and the human who builds reveals that representation is not a binary switch, more like a threshold. So animals like lions and dogs crossed into the threshold of meta-communication and the as-if logic of play, demonstrating cognitive abilities that challenge human exceptionalist theories. So they navigate the magic circle and they do recognise false representations of aggression. But the absence of language storage and civilization in these species confirms that representation alone is insufficient. The human divinity lies in the combination of representation with recursion, high fidelity cultural transmission, and the externalization of signs into anthropological edifice. The edifice allows humans to move from the hunter-gatherer stage of sign usage into the civilized storage of sign usage. So the figure of the symbologist serves as a reminder that we live in a world revealed by language and symbol, where where the map has become as significant as the territory. While a lion may play with its handler in a display of profound social intelligence, it remains anchored to the sensory environment, and humans, through the evolution of symbolic thought, have stepped out of history and into a constructed world, using the symbol as the primary tool to manage resources, store truths, and enact free will. This is the true nature of the Anthropocene, a biosphere dominated by a single species that has successfully replaced instinct with an edifice of representational symbols. Well, that's been the weights cast for today. I haven't got any hair. I had to use the clippers on the ward to cut my hair at the moment, so it looks a bit like look how bad my fringe is. Terrible, isn't it? Getting old. It's 40 this year. Who'd have thunk it? And I've got a dirty sweater on. This is actually a hemp sweater, right? I bought this the other day. It's really cool. It's really comfy. I got it off Etsy. I just couldn't be bothered to do my laundry, so I just left. You can see it's got like beans and toothbrush and shit all over it. But it's a hemp sweater. So it's only like 30 quid. It's really comfy. The cuffs are massive and it's like really stretchy and like, yeah, it's just really comfy clothing. With it saying the delivery note, yeah, I'm going to plug them. I think you should buy them. This isn't a fucking influencer thing, but you should buy one, right? Dip and Doze. Go on their Etsy page. Men's perfect sweatshirt, lunar grey, XX large. Very interesting stuff. I'd love it if you could like write me a comment or like, share this video. Not to say that I'm full of shit or delusional, but maybe. I mean, it's not like I want to shirk accountability. I feel pretty bad, I feel really bad, but I don't really know what to do. Thinking about joining the KGB, maybe. Going off to Russia. They've said you can go to Russia without any money or qualifications or job offers. You just have to say you renounce the neoliberal ideals of the West. I'm basically getting assassinated by a state-run paedophile ring, and the NHS and the police force and other companies, including many high street banks, really want me to shut the fuck up about everything I've got to say. That might sound ridiculous to you, but sadly it's the truth. I don't know what the future holds. Well, not past a couple of hours anyway. Maybe a bit of tomorrow. But basically, I don't know what the future holds. Hopefully it won't be for me or for you. A cup of cold Nescafe decaf. Yuck. I'm going to have some vape. I'm going to tell you that I love you all people. I love all human beings, even the evil ones, because we can all grow and change, get better. We're not animals. We're divine and special, unique creatures with the compassion of love in our hearts and an intrinsic, ineffable and absolutely stupendous view, allowing us to insightfully assess our own behaviours, to love one another and to create peace, reconciliation, reform, and with tact, dignity, sincerity, honesty and valour, hopefully form a new world where we won't fight anymore, but instead help each other to retain our environmental resources, our social integrity and our personal safety. Lots of love. Speak to you tomorrow.